I preach a message to the still suffering alcoholic, and I do it a little bit with a little bit of a heavy heart today. I love Alcoholics Anonymous. I love what we do, and I love what happens here. And I went to a memorial for a 26-year-old man who was the son of one of my close friends in AA, and last week he had relapsed after 6 months, and he got into a fight with his girlfriend, and he'd made the extreme sacrifice and took his own life. And it was sad. It was very sad to be in the memorial today. But there's one of the paradoxes that I've discovered in Alcoholics Anonymous is that while I can't be grateful for everything that takes place, I can be grateful all the time. And in the midst of that, I became grateful for the fact that I know that we were participating in a healing process for his parents, and they were having their own struggle. One of the things that really touched me about, then 3 days prior to that man dying, one of my old sponsees, he was 24 years old. I'd sponsored him for about 6 months earlier this year, and he decided to go move back to Long Beach, hook up with his girlfriend, get their kid, move to Las Vegas, and he had called me the weekend before, and I talked to him about it, and I said, "Man, you're on a razor's edge." And he overdosed. And so, it's an epidemic. And there's one late girl was talking today about Ethan, and she was describing him in ways. And one of the things I've heard in the rooms that really just touched me was it was like a scream looking for a mouth. And that's a condition that described me. I probably got to about age 12, and it felt like inside of me there was a scream looking for a mouth. And that's the point where I had my first drunk. I was raised by good, loving parents. My dad was a fighter pilot. We moved all over. We had some traumatic stuff that happened during the Vietnam era, but we all made it through. But by age 12, while he was over in Vietnam and the peace marches were going on, and he's flying this plane that was not suited well for the mission it was being used for, F-105s, and half of those planes were getting shot down. So what was going on in our household, about half of the friends of my dad's were ending up dead, MIA or POW, and so half of my mom's friends' husbands dead, MIA or POW. And at the same time, I'm watching this stuff on TV, and that's the year 1968 that Bobby Kennedy gets assassinated, Martin Luther King gets assassinated. There's riots at the Democratic Convention. We were living in Chicago at the time, and the city's up in flames. And it just made no sense to me. And my dad had told me before he left, he says, you be the man in the house. I'm the oldest of six, and I knew I wasn't. I knew I couldn't be. And I would lay asleep at night, while I was in a bedroom with two sets of bunk beds and my three brothers, and I'd just bite the pillow because I didn't want them to hear me crying. And it was like there was a scream, inside of me, a scream was looking for a mouth. And when I got the chance, when Dad came back safely and we got our next assignment, some kids asked me if I wanted to go steal some booze from the officers club, and I said, "You bet I do." And I had seen what it had done for people. I had sipped along the lines, but this time I went with kind of a vengeance. Many times I drank, I went with kind of a vengeance, and I had the experience I hear so often described, that experience of warmth filling my heart, solving problems I didn't even know I had at the time, and as if I was able to, it was as if I had discovered the secret to living. And what occurred for me that night was, what, if I can do this once in a while, I can get through this thing. I can get through this thing called life. I'll just fast forward. That was age 12. I got here, I was almost 44 years old. I'm 59 years old now. I've been sober a little over 15 years. 15 years isn't a real long period of time, relative to the amount of time I drank. Drank and used drugs for 31 years, and as long as I was the age I was when I came in. But I tell you what, there's a profound difference between this time frame and the 44 years of life beforehand. There's a sense of clarity about my life, and a sense of joy, and a sense of deep gratitude that I've experienced over the last 15 years. And I'll tell you how I got there. It started with that first drunk, and I needed that first drunk. But I wasn't a very good drinker. I got into lots of trouble. I'll cite the public record. The public record has some information about me. It says, says that I was arrested 48 times, that of those, 7 of those arrests were for DUIs, had a number of felony drug possession charges. They would charge me with distribution, but we'd always convince them, no, consumer. And that's going to barely get me through the weekend. And, I would, I was raised well. I had a good moral convictions, a decent philosophy for life, and I respected the system. I really did. And I would, as many times, half of those arrests were for failure to appear. And how that would happen was I'd be out in the parking lot of the courthouse. I'd be drinking vodka, smoking crack. I'm just trying to get my A game. Because I respect the system and the people. You want to bring them your best. And it takes me a little bit to get to an A game. And if I can't get to an A game, I'm not wasting their time. And, I don't want to have a grounds for an appeal. I want to give it my best shot. And so I would leave. I met my oldest daughter's husband, and she has 2 kids and pregnant with the third. There was an event. She was on her first date with him. They were driving down from their mom's house, which was she had already divorced me. I'd lost custody of the kids and all that stuff. And they were driving. There was a disturbance at my house. It wasn't totally unusual. There was an ambulance, fire truck, a couple of cop cars. But this one was different because it wasn't the police that were arresting me. What was going on was some bounty hunters had hogtied me, and I was laid out in the front yard being handed over to the police when my daughter comes running across the lawn with her first date husband-to-be, who I met, in a compromising position. He still married her, though. There's more information in the public record. After I'd been sober for about 3 or 4 years, I had remodeled my house in Colorado, and most of my drinking and using was done in Colorado and Arizona. And I moved out here about 15 years ago as part of the process of getting sober. And lived in Colorado Springs near the base of Cheyenne Mountain. If any of you are familiar with that, Cheyenne Mountain is the command center for North American air defense. So there's serious stuff takes place there. Well, what had happened was my daughter we were getting the landscape redone after we had remodeled the house, and she called for a service location, and the utilities people showed up with police escorts, and that got her all freaked out, and she called me and says, "Dad, police escorts with utilities." And I said, "Well, ask them why they're there." And she did, and something about a telephone pole. Well, one of the challenges I have, in speaking is that there's 2 things. There's what happened, and there's what I think happened. And they're not always the same. Now, also, I'm a blackout drinker. I get into lots of trouble when I'm drinking, and along the way I discovered, early on I discovered the recreational suitability of adding drugs and whatever to the experience to enhance it. As I went on, I discovered that I could alleviate the blackouts and the DUIs by mainlining cocaine and speed, and solved the oblivion problem, but it introduced some new issues. Primarily psychosis, but many of you may relate to this, but psychosis isn't so bad when you're in it. You just got to deal with it. You got stuff coming at you. You got life happening. It's not so fun to watch, but having sponsored some people and been now listening to the stories from my children talk about their experiences with me. So anyway, she said, "Telephone pole." I said, "Yeah, I remember what happened to the telephone pole. One night I had been out. I had done a perimeter check. It was 3 or 4 in the morning. Everything was good. And then I see a spaceship come down right over Cheyenne Mountain. And I had seen this thing before, but this time it comes down and it locks onto the street light right in front of my house. And I wasn't sure what it was doing. I knew it wasn't good, and nobody else seemed to be that alarmed. I'm glad I was, because we were all threatened. And so I went into action. I grabbed an axe, and I started chopping down the telephone pole. And I'm working on it, Crackhead vodka drinkers, we're not very productive, but so I'm doing my best, and going around one side, going on the, and I go around the back side, and I hit the power wire that comes from the ground up to power the light, and it sparks out. And it goes dark, and the power in the light, the the part of the neighborhood go out, and so now I'm just chopping away in the dark, and pretty soon a utilities truck comes up. He's got the little lights on. He's got the searchlight on the mirror, and they're looking. There's two guys in there, and they get a beat on me, and I'm out there probably, it was probably June, so it was probably my standard uniform of boxer shorts and a tank top and an axe. And I engaged them in, trying to describe the grave nature of the problem we face, because I was really preoccupied with the fact that I shouldn't have pawned my chainsaw, because I could have, not only did I have to do that, but that spaceship had jumped over to the next one and moved on. I knew we had some work to do there to take those things down. Well, the note that they wrote in the file, that is still in the file today, and I've done some work on this, but it says the owner is unpredictable and easily provoked. Require police assistance when visiting this address. I still own that house. I've made amends for the street light. I had to pay to have the telephone pole replaced, and I've written letters to the utility department, and they still send the police there. And the house is rented. It's rented to some officers in the Canadian Air Force. Anyway. But like Ethan today, it's not always funny. There's a lot of laughs and giggles when we're out there, and it's actually it wasn't that funny to me at the time, but when I look back, it is now. But page 18 offers some information about what it's like. It says no other illness is like those. If somebody has cancer, no one's hurt or sorry, but not so with the alcoholic illness, because with it goes annihilation of all things worthwhile in life. It engulfs all whose lives touch the sufferers. It brings about misunderstandings, fierce resentments, financial insecurity, disgusted friends and employers, sad wives and parents, warped lives of blameless children. So my story really, what really was always dogging me, the thing that dogged me all the time, the thing I couldn't get away from, was the things that I did that would warp the lives of my blameless daughters. And I didn't mean to do this stuff, but I would be, in the middle of our divorce. I'm fighting for. By then, I had managed to have some financial success in the construction industry. I'd put together some assets and whatever, and so I'm fighting over how we're splitting the assets by fighting over custody of the kids. And my ex-wife had become. Living with us is not easy. We tend to not only warp the kids, but we warp everybody. And she ended up having some psychiatric issues of her own, and she had to be put into a facility for a period of time. And during that process, it became apparent to her that best thing for her would be to divorce me. And I didn't like that, so I fought over custody of the kids. And what I had to do during that time frame, here was the one order from the judge that I had to comply with, and that was not be drunk when I had the kids. And I knew that. And I would wake up in the morning and I would commit to myself, I can't be drunk when I'm with these kids. I've got them today. I'm going to drop them off. I'm going to go to work. I'm going to do what I need to do. I'm going to pick them up, come home. We're going to have dinner, put them to bed. I'm going to do what I'm supposed to do. And I really wanted to do that. I wanted to do that more. I had made super promises many times before that to employers, to my wife, to my family about, my activities. And I remember, I would make that promise to myself, with all my heart. And like 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I might get a letter from the IRS or a phone call from an attorney. And it's like, what do I do? And I just pour a glass of vodka, and I just to get straight, to get the thoughts tuned in so I can deal with the issue. Then I might be 7 or 8 o'clock, and I'm shooting pool at the bar next to our office, and I realize I forgot to pick the kids up again. They've gone home with somebody else again, and one more time I've let them down, and I don't know about you, but I just got to the point where I got so sick of breaking the promise to myself, I stopped making that stupid promise. And I just resigned myself to the fact that I just got to manage this thing. I'm not going to be able to not drink, so I'm just going to have to be able to drink in a way that's acceptable and it doesn't cause many problems. And 48 arrests later. But I managed to have, like I said, financial success. And so after I got awarded primary physical custody of the kids during that hearing because I was manipulated, I was deceitful, I had different attorneys operating on my different DUI cases. During this 2-year period, I got 5 DUIs, and they were all secret, and I was just living in secrets. And When they awarded me primary physical custody of the kids, it looked like the life drained out of my ex-wife's face. Fortunately, God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself. 2 months later, I got sentenced to my first 6-month stint in the county jail in Colorado. I ended up doing a total of 2 years, but this first 6 months, I had to call her and say, well, this deal we've worked out, it's not going to be able to do it because I can't hold up my end. I'm going to be gone for 6 months. And she said, thank God. And she was, even till today, we're best of friends, and she was like one of the people that would always be there. Like being shuffled out in shackles, and once in a while, there's nobody in the courtroom except her sitting in the back, and she just got tears running down her eyes, like, what the hell is wrong with you? So that was 10 years before I got sober, and it's kind of like the turbochargers turned on then. And I just kind of, I had there was a fire inside of me that I couldn't quench. There was a thirst and a hunger that I could never satisfy, no matter what I did. And I would just do more and more and more. Just a couple of quick stories, and I'll talk about sober. But these, there would be these times. I stopped working about 6 years before I got sober. I'd made a lot of money, and my brother and I were partners in a construction company, and we had done well. And one day he comes to me and says, Tom, you are pissing everybody off. Nobody wants to talk to you. The employees hate you. The clients don't want to talk to you. You need to slow down. I said, you're right, Tim. I need to stop. He says, yeah. We'll do whatever it takes. We're going to get you. We're going to go put you someplace for 6 months, a year, whatever it takes. I said, no, I need to quit working. And and I did. And I knew I wouldn't have to work again. I had achieved financial well-being to the state that I would kill myself before I would use it all up. And so that's the last 6 years of my using. I am in the meantime, while that happened, I got visited by the dead members of the Grateful Dead, because now I'm up 6 days in a row, and I'm sleeping for 2 or 3 days, and I'm drinking and smoking and shooting up coke all the time, and I'm just an absolute wreck, although I don't know it. So in this process, I get visited by the dead members of the Grateful Dead, and they inform me that I am to become the reincarnation of Jerry Garcia, and it's a big deal. It was for the good of humanity. People were going to reunite, enjoy peace. They couldn't believe the miracle, and this was a job that I had to work on. So it's not like I didn't do anything for 6 years. I had a lot of stuff going on. There were a lot of setbacks, but anyway, during that time frame, I would have these time where my life would become clear to me for a minute, and I would be by myself. There'd be nobody coming around. My house was a wreck. I had this very nice place in Colorado Springs, and it's strewn with probably 5 or 6 years worth of trash and broken glasses and sewer system backing up in the basement, never getting fixed. And I'd broken all the windows out one time because I didn't like the instructions the spirits were giving me. And then I had walked around in barefoot, and so I've got cut feet, and I was climbing the tree in the back to chase one of those little guys, and I needed to talk to him, and I knew if I chased him up the tree, he couldn't get away, but he jumped to another tree. So I jumped to another tree, and then he jumps to another tree, and so I jumped to another tree, and finally the tree broke, and I tumbled down, and I impaled my foot on a branch on the bottom, and I had stuck a hand, and at some place I had got this huge scar across my head, and so everything was bleeding. And I looked in the mirror, and I got these scars on my hands, blood coming out, and blood coming to my feet, and this thing coming to I thought to myself, oh my God, you've got the stigmata. But anyway, my life would become clear to me, and I would have these thoughts like, man, what if I could just spend some quality time with my kids? That's what I would do. I just need to spend some quality father-daughter time. So I kidnapped my youngest daughter. My oldest daughter was smart. She was gone. she went around, and we went off to the mountains in southern Colorado, and we were having a good time. I'm showing her how to fish, and I'm being responsible about my drinking and using. I'm doing it outside of the RV, and she's in this old RV. It's one that I used to follow the Grateful Dead in, so you can imagine the condition it was in. It was probably a 1973 Chevy, and I would keep her locked in there so I wouldn't lose her, because I thought that would be bad form. Anyway, after like 6 or 7 days, what happens to me is I go out, and I go out hard, and I it could be anywhere, and I do that, and I don't know how long I'm out, but when I come to, my little 8-year-old Bryce is standing there. She's got tears streaked down her dirty face and her matted hair, and she's looked at me, and she's startled that I'm awake. She thinks I've been dead, and she doesn't know what to do. And when I look at her, she says, "Dad, can I at least have some dinner? Warp the lives of our blameless children." Those kinds of thoughts they just were with me. I couldn't, no matter how much I drank, no matter how much I used, I couldn't make those thoughts go away. And there's lots of that stuff. Anyway, September 4th, that was my ex-wife and my anniversary, and she would come by usually on that day for some, to drop off food or something. And she came by with Brycey and with her 2 youngest triplets that she'd had by then, with her new husband, and they just wanted to see how I was doing. And I wouldn't talk to them. I kept them outside, and I went back in, and I started to drink with a panic. I think I probably drank in the next 2 days, the next day and a half, probably 4 or 5/5 of vodka. I used up half to a full ounce of Coke. I'm not sure how much, but I was just using with a panic, just like an absolute frenzy. And again, the condition of my life came clear to me. And here's what really happened was I realized that I had failed in this project of becoming the reincarnation of Jerry Garcia. I honestly did. And I realized that I had let everybody down in my life, and here's one more thing I let down. And I put a rope around my neck, and I sat up on a stool, and I hooked it up to this contraption up in the ceiling in the basement, and knowing that when I went out, because it was like day 6 or 7, that I wouldn't have to feel anything and I wouldn't have to get up. And when I came to, I was in the filth on the floor, and the thing had broken on me, and that was September 6th. And I had come too many times that way. But what's different about this was that, and normally what I would have to do is get some vodka into me. I just have to get something into my mouth. Usually I'd just get the bottle and I'd start shaking, and I'd put it up to my lips, and the thing would just be splashing down the front of me. But I just got to get something in there so I can slow down the shaking. And that would be how I normally would work. But for some reason, I was hungry. And I hadn't been hungry for a long time. I think the only time I ate was, when I had no more, I probably ate once a week. I was about 135 pounds. And I ended up walking up to my ex-wife's house. I talk about that a lot, and I asked if I could have something to eat, and she said, "Make yourself a bowl of cereal." And I made myself a bowl of cereal, and I was holding it and shaking it, and the thing all just fell. I made another one, and it fell, and finally she just made me one, put it down, and she said, "Now eat that." And I ate it, and I went back down, and I slept. And I slept for about 3 days. I got up on September 10th. And I used to go to this facility down in Tucson, and it was nice. It had horseback riding and mani-pedis and inner child care and some pool volleyball. I really enjoyed that place, and I kind of resolved the fact that I was going to be there 30 days a year for the rest of my life, however long that was going to be. And I called them, and they put the counselor that I normally dealt with on the phone. He says, "No, Mr. Phelan, these beds are for people who are serious, and you're not serious." So I ended up booking to go to a place in Antigua because the inner child was crying out for a beach cabana. And what ended up happening was September 11th. For some reason on September 11th, I plugged in my televisions. I had unplugged all my appliances many years prior to that because there had been an implant put in my leg. I know it because I dug it out. I just couldn't ever get it because the technology that they use is way advanced beyond what we have. And I'd get my hand on the transmitter, the tweezers on it, and it would morph like into a vein or a tendon. And dealt with that infection for a while. But anyway, I plugged the TVs in, and what I ended up doing on September 11th was watching those towers going down. My plan was to go to the storage locker and pick up some more drugs and go to the liquor store and spend the 3 or 4 days it was going to take to get my A game to be able to go to the airport and spend 5 hours on a plane and have to talk to people. And instead, I watched those towers come down all day. And later, the world changed then, and people with 5 warrants weren't going to be flying anymore, so I wasn't able to fly to Antigua. And my daughters came and got me. They brought me to their mom's house. We kind of hung out there I slept there for a couple days. And when the airlines opened up, my brother, who was he put me on a little twin proper and sent me to a place that my youngest brother had gone to 4 years prior to that, and he was sober. And so I got to this place. I got there on a Thursday morning, and brought into the group, and I'm sitting down in the group. John asked me why I'm there. I described to him reincarnating as Jerry Garcia. I've got a big project, not doing very well with it, and I tried to explain to him how I'm failing, where I'm falling short, and what I've got to do. And he says, "You're full of shit." He sends me over in the corner. I'm sitting over in the corner, kind of whimpering and weeping. And the next lady shares about finding her dad dead on her basement floor when she was 13, and she describes the next 39 years of her life, and she describes her life as a prostitute on the streets of San Diego and doing what she had to do to get the next drink or the first drink, the next hit or the first hit. And she described being beaten, being raped, all the things that would happen, a very, very horrific life. And as she just described herself, something happened inside of me. Maybe her brokenness touched my brokenness, or her humanness touched my humanness, because I recognized her as another broken human being just like me. And, up to that point, for a long time, the only humans were just simply objects. What can I get from you? What can I use you for? And if there's nothing I can use you for, I don't need you. And that's how I dealt with humans. And in this experience, in her brokenness, I experienced her as no different than me, and that we were both hopeless. And then, as she was talking, she started using terms that my daughters, when they would they came a couple times to family weekends at this place in Tucson, and they would use, they'd talk about having faith, knew that Dad would get it back together, and someday she started talking about that, about her relationship with her dad, and something inside of me just let go. I knew that there was nothing that I could do that would ever be different. The best I could do on my own was end up dead on my basement floor, maybe a jail cell floor, because I'd had the thoughts of killing myself there. And I knew that there was never going to be anything different, and that nothing was going to change. And I look up on the wall in this room probably been in there for 40 minutes, and on the wall was the Footprints poem. I had been raised with good, loving parents. We went to Mass every Sunday. I'd had some really good examples of non-hypocritical holiness. My grandmother was a daily Mass attendant, and one of us was going to Mass with her when we were with her. No, it doesn't matter. And so I would get to see her, and she was authentic. She lived what she said, and so I knew that there was something about it. And I look up on the wall, and I see the Footprints poem, and I was familiar with it, and I'm thinking to myself, two sets, one set, the different sets of footprints. And I said, I'm wondering, God, have you been carrying me? Because I'm still around, and this is crazy, because I shouldn't be. I should have been killed in Rio de Janeiro. I should have been killed in India. I should have been killed in Miami. There's many times I should have been killed, but I wasn't. And my thought turned to God, and my thought was this: I'm screwed. I don't know what to do. Nothing's ever going to change. I need help. That afternoon, a man came from AA and doing what he just does. He's 30 years sober, and he still does it on Thursday afternoons. And that's what he comes to that facility, asks if anybody wants a ride to a men's meeting that he goes to. And I raised my hand along with two other men, and I went to my first meeting. And this meeting was in the East Valley Men's Group in Tempe, Arizona. I don't remember what they said, but I do remember these things specific. One thing that really got my attention was they started on time and they ended on time. The other thing was the readings. The readings were not what I was prepared for. I imagine in the facilities that I was at, there were meetings, but I never went to them. Or if I did, I never heard anything. But I heard the readings different. In our 12 and 12 that our literature person read. And by the way, congratulations, Chris. Thanks for coming up here and sharing yourself by 9 years. And welcome to our new friends. In the first step essay in the 12 and 12, at the end of the essay, it says, once I've become convicted of the fatal nature of my condition, I become willing to listen as only the dying can listen. I don't know if that's what happened to me. I don't know how God's grace works, but I imagine it does. And if I look back on my life, how it might have worked is that when I was connected with that lady on Thursday morning and she was telling her story and I let go, at some level I knew that there was nothing I could do and I needed something else, no matter what it was. And in that moment, maybe grace entered my heart. And what all that does is it doesn't fix the deal. It just allows me to have the power to take the next step. And the next step for me was I was in a Saturday morning meeting. An H&I guy came. Well, I went to that meeting on that Thursday night and had an experience of feeling welcome, hearing some laughter, connecting, identifying with people, hearing what they were talking about. And I slept that night. I went back to the facility and I slept. This facility was not like the place I would go down to in Tucson. This place did not have mani-pedis, no volleyball in the pool, no horseback riding. It was a big book, and you're going to meetings. And if you don't like this, if you don't follow the rules, the door doesn't lock. You're welcome to leave. And so that was the kind of the condition. It was a 12-step place. On the other side of the alley, crack deals were taking place. They didn't care. They're out there trying to carry the message, to keep us alive. Following Saturday morning, a man came into the facility, 9 o'clock in the morning, dressed much like I am today, a sports coat, a tie, shoes, trousers. And he stood up for an hour and he told his story, much like I'm telling my story. He described seeing men climb on out of vents and rappelling to the floor. And he described being drunk with his boss, wrecking cars, and his cheeseburger landing on his boss's head. And I laughed at that. I thought that was funny. Never had happened to me, but I could see how it was possible. He described the kind of things that his wife was pregnant and he left her and moved in with his girlfriend. He described the kind of things that he would do that is a result of his alcoholism. But it's different than what the lady on Thursday had was, he was 10 years sober, standing up there on a Saturday morning, doing what he described as life-saving work for himself. That it was important for him to do this, so that his kids and his wife were at home and they were fine and they were happy that he was there doing this and that he wasn't getting paid for it. And I believed everything he said. I connected with him again as I connected with that lady, and I recognized his brokenness as my brokenness. But he started then talking about a change that took place. He talked about being sponsored, and in the process of being sponsored, working through the steps in the book Alcoholics Anonymous. And as a result of that, being part of a fellowship and being an active member of his groups and taking commitments in his group and then starting to sponsor people. And then he describes how his life starts to come back together as he places reliance on a power greater than himself through this process. And all of that stuff was like these words on the wall. I had no personal experience with it. I had no way to conceptualize it for myself other than, sounds good. But something happened inside of me, and it was like this. In the Fred's story in the More About Alcoholism chapter, he says at the end, it says, once I made my mind up to go through with the process, I had the curious feeling my alcohol problem has been relieved, as it turned out to be. I made my mind to go through with the process that Terry described, and something happened to me. I didn't get cured. I didn't recover. What became available for me is to do the next thing and start to and again engage and listen to this stuff. And when I would go to the meetings, it was almost as if you guys were talking about the very things that my heart needed to hear at that time. And you spoke about it in a way that articulated exactly the issue that my heart was desiring in a way that in my heart I can't describe it. Bill talks about it in a couple places. We get pretty bad in these things. No words can describe the loneliness and despair in this bitter morass of self-pity. Or he describes it's indescribably wonderful. What we do is we tell our stories, and in telling our stories, hopefully each of us goes on our own journey into our own life, into our own souls, and has our own experiences and brings it back. This is a safe place. I'm listening to a speaker, and I get taken to a place in my heart. Maybe something frees up, a memory that I couldn't have ever thought of on my own. It gets freed up and it comes out. And, in normal life, if that memory had come up, it might come up as in psychological terms, maybe a complex. And it might irritate me and it might set me off. But in the rooms, it comes up maybe in the midst of laughter or maybe in a moment of poignant silence. Sometimes, have you ever noticed in these rooms, it gets so silent that even the chairs stop creaking. Like there is, when they talk about in the book of, I'm not a real scriptural person, but I do pay attention to it because I've discovered in many of the traditions that there's language that's describing things that I can't describe and talking about things I can't talk about, but it's the things that I want to talk about the most, the depth of my heart, the depth of my soul. Elijah finds God in the stillness of the wind. That's what I've experienced here. So my journey began then. I followed what they said to do. I did as best as I could. I did the first 5 steps with a spiritual advisor in the facility. And then I bought a place in Arizona thinking I'm not going to go back to Colorado Springs because there's aliens there. And somebody said, you might need to go to a more structured environment. Why don't you go to consider this place in Dana Point? And I said, okay. It looked like it was by sailboats and stuff. Turns out it's not it's really more like San Juan Capistrano. Nice as it is, but it's not the beach. And I'm in this place with 12 people in 4 bedrooms. And and it's exactly where I needed to be. But before I went there, I had gotten some names of people who I might contact when I got out to California from that Thursday night meetings. I just, I'm going to California. I don't know anybody. Can I get some names of people I can talk to? And I write them down in my pocket-sized big book, which I was carrying with me everywhere. I get out here. So Wednesday night, I get taken to a meeting in San Clemente. It's loud. They're not doing it like they were doing it in Arizona. I'm judging it. I'm starting to become full of fear. And the first man that shares says, "Hello, my name is David B. I'm an alcoholic. I'm a drug addict." I look around and said, because he uses his full name when he introduces himself. I think, that is weird. How do I know that name? I'm scratching my head. Then I pulled out I pulled out the pocket-sized big book, and that was the first name that was written in my book. God doing for me what I couldn't do for myself, because by then I had been a spiritual seeker. And I knew that I had become aware that this is a spiritual program. I had gone to India. I'd actually met Mother Teresa. I'd met the Dalai Lama. I'd met a Hindu saint named Papaji. And every time after all that stuff, within 2 hours, I was loaded. And I had powerful experiences in the presence, but none of those were a practical application of the principles necessary to allow me to have my own personal connection with the power that's going to keep me sober. So I went up and asked David to be my sponsor, and he's still my sponsor. We talked on the way when I was coming up here. I'm not able to go to a retreat in October, and he's going to go without me. But we go to 2 or 3 retreats a year together. I see him twice a week. He's taught me how it is to be a loving man. He's gone through incredible experiences. His daughter committed suicide. His mother died. His wife had drained their bank accounts trying to keep their daughter alive and bankrupted them. And all through that experience, a period of about 18 months, David was consistently a solid. He would be sad when he was supposed to be sad. He would be responsible when he was supposed to be responsible. But he was always consistently doing the same things, going to his meetings, doing his prayers, making his phone calls, sponsoring guys, doing all that stuff. And today he is maybe one of the most spiritual, holy people I know. Thanks for Alcoholics Anonymous. So I meet David. I'm in Dana Point. And I'm starting to do this thing. I'm going to 2 or 3 meetings a day. I'm loving this. I love I do a 4-step workshop with him. I get in touch with the depth of my selfishness. I really get to discover how the hopelessness of self-centeredness. And I kept hearing in the meetings, how free do you want to be? And I wanted to be free. And I told David, I said, David, I got these 5 warrants in Colorado, and I don't feel very free. Every time I get in a car with a newcomer, I know we're going to get pulled over, and I'm going to get extradited from California to Colorado via Texas, and I'll be eating out of Taco Bell and peeing in a bottle for 2 weeks. I didn't want to do that. It was never comfortable. He says, well, what do you want to do? I said, I think I need to go deal with this stuff. And the problem was I was dealing with DUI number 6 and 7, and three unresolved felony charges that I had never even made appearances on. And so I talked to him, I talked to my attorney, talked to my family. There's a possibility I was going to be doing 30 years. They've been bandering that number around for a long time. There's a possibility I'd be doing 16 years, and there's a possibility I'd do 2 years, something like that. And so that's the mindset I went in. I was debating, should I move to Costa Rica? Should I move to Australia? They've got AA over there. I can do this stuff, because I'm loving what was going on, but there was still more that God needed to do with me as far as the work in my life, in my heart. And I went and turned myself into Arapahoe County, which is southeast Denver. It was DUI number 6. I had already pled guilty. I just never showed up for the sentencing. The stipulation on the guilty plea was for 7 days, because there was some evidence that the equipment they were using was faulty. Other people had gotten out, and so there was a chance that I might beat it. And so the DA was willing to give me the plea. But that was 3 years prior. And so when I showed up in front of the judge, he says, Mr. Phelan, I've been looking at this thing. It's been around for a long time. I don't like the stipulation. 7 days, you're going to be here for a year. So he sentenced me to a year, and there was a problem because of the unresolved felony charges. I got put in maximum security in that Arapahoe County jail, and that put me in a 23-hour day lockdown. And so I'm just bummed. I'm just thinking, geez, Costa Rica would have been good. I can't do much 12-step work here. And after about 6 days, I'm just really bummed. I'm really depressed, and I'm praying. I'm saying, God, just give me a sign. I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Seems like I was doing all this stuff, and I was going to a promises meeting, and they'd read these promises. This is not part of the promises anywhere. And then I prayed that night. I said, just give me a sign that I'm doing your will. The next morning, Chaplain Kelly knocks on the door, swings the door open. And I wasn't, like I said, a particularly scriptural person, but he says, anyone a Bible? I said, I'll take a Bible. And it came with a meditation. I took the meditation and read the meditation. It said, read Romans 12:14. I opened to Romans 12:14. It says, bless those that persecute you. Bless them and do not curse. Give up your conceit and be with people of low position. Well, I looked around myself. There are some people of low position here, because I'm one of them. And I knew I was full of conceit. And said, when there's joy, sharing the joy, and when there's sorrow, sharing the sorrow. And I had a sense, something released in me. And I read the verse up above it. I said, that is really interesting. I read the verse above it. I said, the authorities are in place to carry out my will. My prayer was, just show me that I'm doing your will. And I knew that I was doing exactly what it is that God needed me doing at that moment. And I had a sense of safety, peace, freedom. I became more free than I had ever been in my life in that maximum security facility. And in the promises, I did realize the promises. In the promises is we suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. But in the middle of that promises is we suddenly realized God. I had a sudden realization of a power greater than myself. And, that experience is something that can't go away. I've always got it. As long as I do the work to maintain fit spiritual condition, I've always got access to that experience. I've always got access to the hopelessness of what it was like when I came in here, as long as I stay fit spiritual condition. I got out of there after a year, and they put all my cases together, and I ended up back in California on a 4-year probation thing, and then after 2 years, they released me. When I was about 6 years sober, my daughter had 2 kids by then, and one was, I was 8 years sober, he was 7. So I had a 7-year-old and a 5-year-old. My grandson was 7, my granddaughter was 5. And she let him to come stay with me for 2 weeks out here in California. It was really cool. And this is my oldest daughter, not the one with the dinner, but the one who had the restraining order against me, so I couldn't get near her. The one who with the hog-tied thing, yeah. And so I've got the kids, and we're doing all the wonderful California things. We even came up to Santa Barbara on the train. Went to Disneyland. We were going to the beach, all this stuff. But my grandson at the time was like this absolute fanatic about big fish, about orcas and great whites. And so anytime we're at the house, he'd get me on Google, showing me these research projects that are taking places. And he said, showing me these scientists that are doing the work. And what he wanted to do more than anything was go see the orcas in SeaWorld. And so we finally did that, and we went on Saturday, which was a big mistake because I assumed there'd be nobody there, but the place was packed. And so we do our thing. We get there early, and we go, and we realize that you've got to go to these orca things at set times because they do shows. And so we went and we toured SeaWorld, and all the time he's tugging me, wanting to go back down there. He's tugging me, and I said, and I've got his sister with me, and we're doing our best. And finally I said, okay, it's time to go. And we start heading there, and he takes off running, and all of a sudden I lose him in the crowd. And I pick up my granddaughter, and I'm chasing him, and I keep just going to the same place. And finally, I see him dart up the stairs, up to that platform that separates the 2 exercise tanks that they have for him. And so I see him up there, and I go puffing and puffing up into the thing. And when I get up there, he's down on the thing, and he's got his hands to the thing. He goes, I could hear him crying. I said, Jace, are you crying? He goes, Grandpa, they're so beautiful. That's an experience I know that God intended me to have. But what I experienced at the time also was that it was as if the members of Alcoholics Anonymous who had shooken my hand, who had given me hugs, who had smiled at me over the period of time before that, it's like they were standing there with me, and they're saying, yep, this is what we're talking about. This is the thing we're talking about. I look at, there's some pretty remarkable things that take place here. I'll touch real quickly on the problem. The problem is, the root of the problem is selfishness and self-centeredness, right? And So we've got to, in the 10th step, when it says, we cease fighting everything and everyone, including alcohol, and it goes on, it says, because by this time the problem has been removed. So what's the problem? The problem is my perspective. My perspective is fundamentally self-centered. And here's how I understand it. Where did that come from? Did all of a sudden one day I just wake up and I'm totally self-centered? The best I've heard it described is, no, that's not what happens. Sandy Beach would talk about it. He'd say that, if the promise in the 12th step is that we're going to awaken, what is it we're awakening from? He says, we're awakening from a self-centered trance. And so from this self-centered trance is the product of my perspective. And my perspective is fundamentally self-centered. And what that means is that it happens to all human beings. There's a great friend of AA, Thomas Keating, Cistercian monk, and he's a leading advocate for centering prayer contemplative movement. He describes it like this. He says that when we start to become aware of who we are, and we start to differentiate parents from things, and we start to develop our who we are and our sense of who we are, we begin to develop a strategy driven by instinct to achieve what we believe to be satisfaction or happiness in this life. And so as we go through, we have all these experiences. All of us have it differently. We encounter circumstances, events, whatever, and we filter this through, and it comes back in through our formula. But the problem is as we begin the process of developing our design for living, if you will, that we're doing it from an unconscious, self-centered perspective. Because as an 18-month-old, I don't know that the world doesn't constellate around me. It just seems mom and dad are out here, grandma and grandpa are out here, neighbors are out here. Life just seems to happen, and it appears to me that I'm at the center of the universe. And what happens to all humans is we end up having to develop strategies to address it because it's painful. For me as an alcoholic, I've discovered a solution at age 12, and it's stamped deep down in my soul. This is the solution. That is the buzz that comes from a few drinks. Because the problem with self-centeredness is that I can never be here and now. I'm always experiencing an event through, how am I supposed to react? What does this mean for me? I've always got this internal conversation going on with every experience in my life. And so I'm never present to the very moment that the experience is taking place. I'm always about a half a beat off. So I'm always feeling like I'm not part of things. And until when I get a buzz going with a few drinks or some drugs or something, where then all of a sudden the universe seems like it's in tune, for about after that third or fourth drink, I'm in paradise. The bartender loves me. The jukebox music is perfect. The wallpaper on the walls is great. The frayed chairs is the perfect. I'm in the perfect bar. But about drink 5, 6 or whatever, I lose it. And then all of a sudden I'm fighting with somebody, and maybe at about 2 o'clock they kick me out of the place. I'm shuffling around out in the parking lot, figuring out what I'm going to try to do. So I've got, Bill talked about it. We're talking about a simple but not easy process, because it means the destruction of self-centeredness. How my experience is how my self-centeredness has been destroyed, or the problem has been removed, is that in step 3, after I've discovered the hopelessness of my condition, I've discovered that the real insanity is not what happens when I start drinking or using. That's very predictable, given my abnormal reaction to drugs and alcohol. I keep doing it. I will drink and use a lot, and that will cause a problem. But that's an absolute predictable, not insane problem. The thing that's insane is I get out of a jail. I've been locked up for 30 days, 60 days, whatever, completely sober, completely detoxed, and I pick up a drink. I swear off in the morning at 3 o'clock, something happens, I pick up a drink. That's abnormal. That's insane. Couple that inability to think, that inability to make decisions, the peculiar mental blank spot with this peculiar physical reaction, and I'm hopeless. That's what I've discovered. And then step 2 is I see some other people doing it a different way. I believe that whatever they're doing is working. I'm going to put my trust in that power that they're putting their trust in. So what happens in step 3? When I was an 18-month-old, I developed my design for living unconsciously. It just happened. Step 3, I'm going to develop this design for living consciously. I'm going to put a new power at the center of my life, and that power is not me. I don't need to know it. I don't need to describe it. I don't need to name it. I just need to know that there's a power flowing through that is the source and center of the universe, and I'm not it. And it would be really good if I could be aware of it and tap into it, if I could have a conscious relationship with that thing. I go through the rest of the steps, 4 through 12, and this is an experiment. I'm conducting an experiment. I am not only the subject of the experiment, I am the experimenter, and I am the witness to the experiment. My job is to be honest about what it is I'm witnessing. My job is to be honest about what's happening on the inside, because I'm the only one that can tell you. I'm the only one that can tell you about the release that comes when I understand how selfish I am in the fourth step, when I get to see how fear really drives my life. And I get to accept a solution where do as I think God would have me do and humbly rely on him. He'll enable me to match calamity with serenity. I start to do that stuff, and I start to have these new experiences. All of a sudden, my design for living becomes worthless. That unconscious one because out of the unconscious one, I love the line in the 7th step, where in the 12 and 12, where it says our character defects are activated by our self-centered fear. I'm running around reacting. Life happens and I react. The promise in the spiritual experience is a profound alteration in my reaction to life. That's what I get to have as a result of this thing. And then I get to have experiences now from this new perspective. Each experience I have is from this new perspective. I know it's not me. Of myself, I am nothing. The Father doeth the works. That's where I've got to get in touch with. I've got to get in touch with it. There's a power flowing through me that's flowing through me all the time. It always has been. The only thing that's ever blocked it from me is pomp, glamour, worship of other things. I've got to get free of my ego. I've got to get free of my self-centeredness so I can see the truth about what's always happening. That power has always been there. It's never not there. If I'm aware of that all the time, I can never be excited. I can never be agitated. If I understood the truth about what really is happening, is that God is flowing through me at all moments, and flowing through you at all moments, flowing through this entire universe at all moments. The second it stops, we stop. And it doesn't matter. And so if I accept that, and I know that, and I can really get to the heart of that, all of a sudden my life becomes a new thing. In the doctor's opinion, it says that in order for these hopeless types to recreate their lives, their ideals must be grounded in a power greater than themselves. The beautiful thing there is God didn't give me back my old life. God continues to give me a new recreated life. Every 7 years, I've got a new set of cells. I'm always recreating. At least today, I get to be conscious of it. At least today, I get to participate in it. Today, I don't have to resist it. Today, I get to be part of this. And out of this, what comes is the deepest sense of gratitude I can have. And that is that I've recovered from a hopeless state of mind and body. And that God has given me one unique gift in life. And that unique gift in life is to be able to share this with other people. To be able to sit down with men and tell them what happened to me. So that they might be able to all of a sudden maybe have hope arise. And going from hopeless to hope is infinite. There's no way I can do it on my own. I can't get there. Something big has got to make it happen. And that's what God does. God uses us to make that little shift. It's just a little shift. But when that thing happens, then all of a sudden we can do some new things. I'm very sad about Alan and Kathy and the loss of their son. And I can see what's happened to them. It's radioactive. There was not one kid in that, one 26-year-old in that place, not just blubbering away. It was just sad as can be. And that's going to radioactive. The effect we have on others is radioactive. I can try to kid myself in the middle of my alcoholism, my addiction, that it doesn't affect anybody, but it does. It blows everywhere. If I can say I wasn't a thief, but I stole people that I love's peace of mind, and I don't think there's anything more valuable I can steal. But on the other hand, some of us get recovered. I'll just do it with this. We are a pinhead on a problem. There's 7.8 million people in the world. 780 million of them are alcoholics and drug addicts, 1 in 10. That means there's about 35 million in the U.S. that seems to about check out. Some people say there's 23 million people recovered. I don't think that's true because that's based on counting meetings. I know that I go to more than one meeting a week. I go to 7 meetings a week. So the number I've heard is more realistic, is more like 4 million people. So less than 0.5% people are recovered. We're the pinhead on a problem. But when we do this thing and we take it out to somebody else, maybe a man, maybe Billy, a new guy sponsored 2 years ago, goes home, goes to his parents, and after a couple of years they can go to their club and they can say, how's Billy doing? Well, Billy's back in school. Billy's got a girlfriend. Billy's been sober for 2 years. Pretty soon they start asking Billy about issues in their life. All of a sudden, we, the broken, become people who other people lean on. Because we become very reliable, we become very solid in an almost miraculous way. So if you're out there and you're wondering about this thing, and if you're new, do the most important thing you can do, and that is get with somebody and discover if you've got this thing. If you've got this thing, it's bad news. But the good news is there's a solution. You've got to give everything in order to achieve it. Thanks.